Welcome back to A Shark's Perspective. TV is one of those topics I talk about frequently on this show, but mainly because so few marketers have knowledge in this space, and we definitely need more knowledge sharing. But what kind of TV works best? What are the trends? We know what we hear often about when reading the trades, about the next big thing, but are we missing the opportunities in front of us, the ones that could help us optimize our current campaigns with digital and other traditional a lot better? Dave Morgan is the CEO and founder of Simulmedia, a TV ad platform that delivers predictable, scalable, and optimized advertising. And he's a lifelong entrepreneur with a strong background in both digital and TV advertising. And on this episode, we'll discuss the state of the TV industry today, data-driven linear TV, addressable, connected digital marketing, optimization, Netflix, Prime, Hulu, and a lot more. So let's tune into a Simulmedia mogul with a media mogul shark on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Dave, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. From looking at your background, I'm really curious, how does a law degree translate into CEO of a media company? And tell us a little bit more about you and your background to date.
Okay. Well, yeah, I didn't, I'm a bit of an accidental entrepreneur.
Yeah.
If, trying to connect the law degree to working in the advertising technology world. I was working in the newspaper industry in the early 1990s, and that was when the information superhighway talk was big, and it was going to plug into the back of the TV set. And so I ended up working in new media, as we were calling it, pre-web, and early online ad services on online bulletin board services. And then the web hit, and I had a real passion for it. And so I started one of the first ad-serving ad network companies called Real Media, that was the predecessor to 24/7 Real Media. And then an online ad, after leaving that company in 2001, I started one of the first behavioral targeting companies, Dakota, which then we sold to Time Warner AOL. I worked there a little bit, and then started Simulmedia about 11 years ago to try to bring the digital approaches to TV.
Well, you're bringing up a couple of liver spots that are bursting on my arm as we speak, because I recognize the phrases information superhighway and new media, and it just scarily brings back some funny memories. So you're speaking, I ran into you again at TVOT. I know you speak at a ton of TV media advertising conferences. But one of the reasons that I really wanted to have you on the show is a lot of the digital marketing folks out there are not talking about TV. I brought it up when I spoke this year at TVOT. And so many of the advertising folks in the TV space speak about digital now. But it seems so often to me that a lot of the digital marketing players, where a lot of the money is shifted, is not really driven that way. But that's where the spin keeps moving. And so when I see a company positioned smartly like Simulmedia, I'm really interested to know what your perspective is on trying to help kind of explain how you see the landscape of TV and digital and streamed video as well. How do you sort of see the landscape today?
Yeah, so I have, I think, some people accuse me of zagging a little bit when people zig.
Sure.
But, I started Simulmedia because for all the years I spent around the online ad world and the billions of dollars of advertising I was involved with, I never felt we were at the adult table of advertising, where really, really scaled brands spent their money to acquire customers, and that's television. And I think for a lot of people, they assumed there was this just natural assumption that, well, this internet's pretty hot, this search thing has really taken off, and while this social thing looks pretty strong, so TV's just going to disappear. And then we don't have to worry about it, and we're just going to be in the online ad world. And certainly in the early years of the online ad world, we were fighting against TV. That was part of what I did, take budget away, recognizing that we had something new coming. But what online advertising really replaced first and foremost was print.
Yes.
So whether it was yellow pages, classifieds, newspapers, magazines, virtually all of the money that we've seen flow into the online ad world has come out of the print world, and then also come out of the telemarketing, direct marketing world. Certainly call centers and things like that. So I think because the television world's very concentrated, and the word's overused, but it is siloed. Um, it's not very well understood
Yeah,
to people in digital, and and so that's, I think, one of the reasons why it's not paid attention to. Clearly, the TV people were later to pay attention to digital, but they certainly all do now. And the streaming service growth is causing them to look at it more. But I just think it's a cultural thing, and that the digital came up to prove their way in the world. Um, we have a couple massive players that are very independently operating, on sort of their own terms in Google and Facebook.
sure.
So they never felt they had to be part of the broader media world, which was something that, historically, probably all of the different media channels always saw themselves as just one element of a bigger world. And
Hmm.
I don't know that the digital companies and most of the top digital executives have necessarily felt that way.
Agreed. How do you sort of give advice, though, to a lot of these brands that are starting to come up with companies that were heavier, or sort of the native digital? I mean, it's, you sort of think of the millennial generation, that have been more native digitally, and you're starting to see a lot of these groups that are growing out of an internet presence and need to evolve to acquire more customers using TV. What kind of advice do you give those kind of companies as they step into that space?
Well, I think what I like is that the digital first companies, particularly these direct to consumer brands,
Hmm.
are all recognizing on their own that they can't scale their businesses fully in digital alone, and that
Agreed.
both because of the amount of people that you can reach, the impact of the ad units, the speed with which you can reach them, the capacity to queue people fast or not fast in most of those cases, and plus the fact that they're participating in open auction environments where, when you start getting deeper into the far parts of the reach curve on Facebook or Google, you start hitting really, really high pricing. So your cost per acquisition gets really big. And fortunately, those companies, by the time they get there, they really have a product down. They have a supply chain that works. They have a value prop. They understand the customer experience, and they have enough economic engine that they can do the things to get into TV, and recognize that TV has a higher sort of hurdle to get in, because you've got to produce spots. You've got to be able to buy a fair amount. You're buying ad units that are not an individual impression. You're buying big baskets of impressions. So I think that, my advice to a lot of these companies coming in is to realize that TV operates differently, but but you got to find those places that you're willing to compromise what you're used to, and those places you're not. It's interesting. It's a lot of them find it sort of like a Goldilocks situation.
Hmm.
Like, they come in, they first start with direct response TV, and they find that it's great to get some cheap spots, and but like the hula hoop in second grade, you get what you get, the color of the hula hoop, you get what you
Sure.
get, and you don't get upset. So they realize they can't really scale out of direct response, because you don't know when you're going to get spots clearing.
Hmm.
But it's a good way to learn. And then you think, oh, I'm going to go to big agency now because I'm going to go do big
Oh,
branding.
yeah.
And then you suddenly find yourself spending tens of millions of dollars, and your cost per acquisition has gone off the charts, and you can only optimize once a quarter. But sometimes you find out you're stuck on stuff in an upfront. And then you're thinking, okay, I'm going to now try to do it inside, just like I do my search and social, and call networks directly. But then you find out you don't really have any technology, and doing just some simple time-based regressions doesn't work. And so, I find them sort of bouncing around. This one's too hot. This one's too cold.
Hmm.
This one's too hot. Um, and I think it's really only more recently, in the last few years, and it's been an area we work in a lot, where there are now software platform solutions that can help those companies, find sort of the just right way through it. But it's frustrating for a lot of these digital companies.
Agreed. And we obviously, where you are in New York, you see a lot more. I want to always believe a little more sophisticated of a TV buyer in this space. But are you still running across a lot of agencies nationwide that are unsophisticated, if you will, in understanding how to buy TV, whether it's addressable, data driven, linear, anything like that. Are you still seeing a lot of those kind of agencies still unfortunately drive the conversation to where they're not giving necessarily their advertisers the best advice on how to get there? Because I think for a lot of us, as you said, I mean, we sort of know what the solution is, but for a lot of those ones that are interested in testing it to move forward, sometimes they're not always connected to the right agency. And I don't know that I'm seeing enough of the education move forward quickly enough so that it'll help those kind of clients so that they're not wasting money again and making a lot of the mistakes we're trying to tell them not to make.
Yeah, uh, I think that's a really good point. I would say, and I will say this is not geographically limited because I see the same limitations in New York City.
Yeah, that's true.
Um,
I was trying to be
I think,
nice.
yeah, I think that there is a real underserving of clients around the television space, and it's not the agency's fault necessarily. I think some of it starts with the fact that um, the current competitive fee structures around media make it really hard for some companies to be
Absolutely.
able to resource accounts at the level they should. Um, Number two, I think that the loss of a lot of the research departments out of these agencies and in the buy side research out of the industry has really hurt because you know people pretty much are operating off of what they're reading in the trades. That's why
Yes.
I'm really excited to be participating in this podcast. I think when you've got people that are really professionals like you are in the business that are, you know, providing this kind of service and bringing information, into the market, um, um, people are operating off of a lot of truisms and urban myths that aren't true. And so, the thing I spend an unbelievable amount of time on is just going through some real basic
Yeah.
um, setting the record facts. I mean, like most people, for most people, if you ask them, how much of ad supported premium video is on TV versus streaming, they'll tell you that streaming's probably a third to half right now, and growing even faster. And then I try to explain to them, no, if you actually look at the numbers, um, streaming video advertising, premium streaming video advertising, the kinds of stuff that comes from studios or associated with networks or Hulu, things like that, is less than 5% of the total ad load. And linear TV, old fashioned linear TV in a C3 and a C7 windows, 95%. And then they're like, well, how's that possible? And I explain, well, don't forget that streaming probably represents 20 plus percent now, maybe 25, as high as 25% of all premium video consumption. But the vast, 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 vast majority of that are on services that have no ads.
Mm-hmm.
And so between Netflix, part of Hulu, Amazon Prime,
Sure.
and if you look at the big entrants coming in now in Apple's TV Plus, in
Right.
Disney Plus, and in AT&T's HBO Max, they're coming in ad free too. So it's only going to outside of Hulu's ad supported tier, there's not that much
Exactly.
ad supported digital video streaming. And so then they're like, really? Well, yeah, but still TV is going to lose over, the next few years. And then I have to explain, well, if you look at the US government statistics and the numbers from the Pew consumer internet usage, you learn that 35% of American households do not have fixed broadband at home, which means that more than 100 million Americans cannot get a streaming service.
Mm-hmm.
And that number's gone up in the last 2 years. And then they say, well, 5G will fix it. And I'm like, yeah, but do you understand the 5G architecture? 5G is a real transmitter dense network infrastructure. So it's going to go into urban areas and affluent suburban areas where, there already is a lot of fixed broadband.
Exactly.
So, I think a lot of folks got away from the kinds of stuff that was the blocking and tackling of media
Such a
and
great
data
point.
driven marketing.
I agree, and I do think 5G is a game changer, but I think we're still a long ways out from it truly being a game changer. And you're absolutely right. We've got to focus on blocking and tackling. And again, I appreciate your compliment about me. I've lived in this space for quite a while, but what I've found that's really resonated at a lot of the digital conferences I speak at today now is talking about how the two need to play together, especially if you're wanting to grow a business or drive any kind of lead gen at all. And I think people are so caught up in the stuff they read where everybody's cutting the cord and TV is dying a quick death is just not true. And I think, unfortunately, that hype is just overconsumed too much of the conversation. But help, if you will, explain the difference for those that need to educate themselves more on what linear TV is versus data optimized linear TV and how and what you guys provide.
Sure. So, conventional linear TV advertising, which still is by far the bulk of how linear TV ads are bought, sold, packaged today, involves transacting television ad units as part of campaigns, um, on a gross rating point, um, sex age demographic, day, week, time of the day, day part basis. Those are pretty much the core levers that control the purchase of probably 90% of total budgets that are deployed on TV today. And um, and the reasoning for that is that I think the television industry has been smart. And when I say smart, I'll start here first with the sell side. It is a supply constrained market.
Mm-hmm.
They've recognized that if you keep pricing just below the number that everybody would pay, you'll have more demand than you have supply, and that's
Mm-hmm.
always a healthy place to be. That's like what oil companies do. They try as much as possible to have enough wells they can push just enough that 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 people will more people will buy it than they have. So so they've been really good about doing that, and that has kept an awful lot of demand flowing, but they've been able to really simplify what they sell. Now, when you only had 13 channels and three of them were dominant networks, and then eventually four, it was fine, and particularly when most consumer behavior patterns were that the viewing mostly occurred in the evening, in the prime time, it was really easy to sell because you had a few big blocks of big things to sell. But over the decades, you had the growth of cable systems, 30 channels, 50 channels, 60, and now hundreds and hundreds. You had many more TV devices going into the homes. You had high def coming in, and which gave you massive fragmentation. And you had a lot of changes in the workforce and how they worked and the time they worked and the availability of TV, such that you've had massive viewing fragment across all of time parts, days of the week, and shows and networks. So that having these really simple things means these really simple ways to sell means a couple things. One, it means that small panel measurement, which is what Nielsen's providing today,
Mm-hmm.
um, um, is um, is more wrong than right on probably 80% of total TV inventory.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's okay as a currency because currencies don't have to be perfectly accurate because they need to be stable, trusted, comparable, transparent. But boy, you would like accuracy though
Right.
too.
Right.
That would be nice. And so you have so that's why they have to sell so much of it in bulk now, because it's the only way to sort of true up the measurements because you can't have precision measurement. And so it's, as I say, it's priced well enough that it still works well for the price. But the data driven linear approach was to say, hey, if you took a digital approach to this, you would have a massive amount of direct viewing data.
Mm-hmm.
So you build a super panel. Instead of 35,000 households, you'd have 35 million people. You would know what they watch on a second by second basis, directly measured. No diaries where people wrote it down, not just minute by minute, which they may have changed the channel 3 times in that minute. And you would then impute this to every person in every spot on every show every second, so that you actually would have essentially a viewer graph, both at current time and in the future, to know everything everybody is watching. And then you would, like digital companies or direct marketing companies, you would add data to that viewer graph that of basic purchase behaviors and where they live and the kinds of people in the household and and potentially even on an anonymous basis, actual store purchase data and mobile data, and then to make that transactable, you would have an automated software platform, not unlike um, the digital world,
Sure.
so that you could predict these audiences in advance. You could find, put a pixel on your website. You could find all of the people that look like your customers all across EV. And for the 20 million spots any one month, you could find the 3,000 of them, 3,000 out of 20 million, which are the perfect ones for you to have a reach optimized plan the most cost effective way possible. And then as you delivered those ads, you could monitor them in real time, and you could swap out spots and change them to drive more and more of whatever the desired business outcome was. So that's what data driven linear has become. Now, I've described it to you in its most sophisticated
Yeah.
form. I would say, I mean, that's how we're doing it now at Simulmedia. I think, but most of the market still is. I mean, a lot of what's happening in this area is happening at a network only basis. So,
Oh,
within
completely.
NBCU, Turner, and most of them are doing it more with applied data models, not necessarily automated software platforms like ours. But I think that's I hope that's helpful in describing it.
Very helpful. How should a marketer and advertiser look today then at addressing something you sort of referenced a second ago about ad fraud, with TV, so that they don't fall into a lot of the same traps that so many people have fallen into with display advertising? And I say that because so much of the people that start testing this then learn that there's a lot of fraud out there in the space, and that's always a tricky place to find the right place to find your ads without them ending up on places they shouldn't end up on.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple rules. I think first you've got to bring a healthy dose of skepticism when you are working with a digitally born, digitally delivered ad.
Mm-hmm.
The one advantage of being delivered on TV, and in the area where we work, we're working all within the linear feed. We do add some over the top onto it, but at times, but it tends to be very small. But in the linear area, in the end, we always have a Nielsen number, which is at least backed
Exactly.
up by, as I said, not the most accurate panel, but at least it's a panel that of 35,000 people, without 22% of them being bots, which which is the problem in OTT
Mm-hmm.
and connected TV or CTV today, which is when you have an open architecture, you have a capacity um, for spots to come. Uh, the impressions are being delivered out to servers that and clients that you don't know where they are, or proxies, and they can easily be spoofed by bots through proxy servers, and without really strong verification technology and some pretty good forensic sniffing around them too. And I hope, as
Exactly.
I said, it's you have to realize that there's a certain amount of fraud there, and particularly as you're dealing with lesser known apps and lesser known programming. And so, the first thing, the most important thing is just buyer beware, and making sure that to the extent that you have over the top or connected TV in your plans, that you're actually getting access to the full log files. I think using the DAR tags of Nielsen, the
Mm-hmm.
digital ad rating tag,
Mm-hmm.
that's a must do, because that's going to show you that actually a call happened. I was also excited to see Innovid is now pushing into this space as well, and it's going to have the capacity to track against that. Um, so, I think the first thing is recognize the moment someone's talking acronym to you, it sounds buzzy, beware.
Agreed. I don't think nearly enough people understand the value of data driven linear and addressable just based on the amount of fraud that they don't know is actually out there with bots. It's scary how much it's taken over part of that conversation. But are you having a lot more conversations now with people? This has always been really important to me. How are brands and advertisers and agencies looking at doing this more from a TV plus digital campaign and approach as opposed to just TV or just digital? Are you having those conversations a lot more with your clients today?
We are, but it's still difficult.
It is.
The and it starts with the fact that for too many of the clients, those budgets are controlled by very different people, frequently at different agencies, certainly in different departments of
Exactly.
agencies. And, and you understand this because you live in the world,
Yeah.
and frequently by people that don't like each other.
Yeah. Well, a friend of mine said I've never met one agency who said that they would work with another agency and hand them the money because they thought the other agency could do it better. And
Yeah.
that's so true. They're all competing and beating
Yeah.
up each
And,
other.
and that's the case internally in most companies because most people's incentive structures and staffing and importance in their organizations tend to revolve around their portion of the budget, and it's a bit religious.
Yeah.
And so when people tell me that they're channel agnostic in their video strategy, I call BS.
Exactly.
I understand they want to say that, I understand they want to believe that, but I know that most of them are not actually doing the kind of attribution that like you're familiar with, um, from your Axiom addressable days, that they can truly get down to a level of granularity on a person spot, impression, transaction, action level to know that to compare one to the other. We did work a number of years ago with Facebook where we did a double blind matching, between Facebook in a clean room and our panel, and looked at TV delivery and Facebook delivery against at the individual level, and it was pretty extraordinary the synergy or kicker effect if you were able to land both of them within a day on the same person.
Exactly.
It's extraordinary, and I think 1 plus 1 is not two, it's not three, it's five plus,
Hmm.
and we saw that on probably a dozen different campaigns. So I do think the future is going to be, a high degree of synchronization, coordination between TV and digital units. Um, However, today it's really hard to do, and I think one of the reasons is, particularly in the TV world, outside of the areas of data-driven linear where I and some other companies work, there's not a lot of attention on core things like real reach frequency management. And 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 even as bad as TV is in that, when you go over to digital, when they talk reach frequency management, they talk about it daily,
Yeah.
not monthly, for one simple reason,
Oh my gosh.
because they don't have reach.
Yeah.
So you start running digital on a monthly reach curve, and you start running ads after the first day.
Yeah, one of the biggest problems, and I talk about this a lot in conferences when I speak about, delivering campaigns. And if you're on the brand side, unfortunately, a lot of the brands don't understand a lot of the advertising mechanics. But your customers, they're seeing a gazillion ads that have mixed messaging that come across the wrong time of the day, and they see the sausage making process that you didn't do well, and then you wonder why it doesn't perform. But if you synchronize, as you said, that media, it can provide an amazing lift. And I'm still shocked that more brands aren't doing it, but you'll almost consistently see a 30% lift if it's done right.
Yeah, and this is why I think that, just as we've seen in the digital world, we're going to see the TV world and then the over the top and connected TV world really merge into the same, operating platform.
Mm-hmm.
I think the concept of data driven linear addressable, um, conventional linear over the top connected TV are all going to be driven out of the same, video ad platform or TV ad platform, whatever it's people eventually call it, because you need to synchronize them, and they can be synchronized. And so even ultimately, if different entities are handling some of the planning or the buying or the attribution, you're going to need to make sure that they're handled on a consistent platform. And so right now, we're still in the point solution phase of that business. If we looked at it as an enterprise software world, you've got, people with expertise in, um, uh, consumer analytics,
Mm-hmm.
and people with an expertise in, um, planning selection, and people with expertise in, um, um, buying and negotiating and automated execution trafficking and, um, spot occurrence and, in measurement and then attribution. And I mean, that's been a big thing for us at Simulmedia, was to really pull all of those together in one platform. But still most of the world is still, and addressable sits in its own little world with its own system, largely hand driven in most of these places. So that's the big thing now. I think as this becomes mainstream, we're going to see it really come around one platform, and then it will have to all be synchronized.
You published an article not that long ago in Media Post about the need for more expensive advertising based off of Publicis CGO. Can you unpack that a little bit about what you meant by more expensive advertising and that need?
Well, I mean, right now we have an industry that, for a bunch of reasons, has viewed the advertising unit impression as a pure commodity, and has uh, has enabled a focus across the industry about it being, cost and efficiency based, and not value and effectiveness based. And and I think that as as we see more, it's interesting, as we see more digitally savvy marketers start moving into things like TV and the rest of other media, and start real and be growth focused, they realize that they need to change their focus more towards value and effectiveness, because it's all about growing and growing profits. And in that world, you're going to need a higher degree and higher, more granular control over the individual ad spot. And so today, because we're cost and efficiency focused, there's a lot of incentives to create a lot of extra spots that are needed, because that way you bring your per unit price down.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's bad for the consumer, because they get inundated with a lot more spots than they would like to. And so I think this future gets to more of a value focused. Like, I want to find just the people I need that will be best for me to grow my business. I'm going to track it pretty carefully. I'm going to pay a premium for that unit. The publishers will have fewer units because they're going to get more money per unit, and they're going to have bigger audiences and more loyal audiences, because they're going to have fewer, more relevant ads. And and the, and, and the consumers are going to think, like, this is great because I'm going to get fewer, more relevant ads. I'm going to have more awareness of the ads that I do see, and probably a better experience, and I'll be delighted. And so I do think that all of those things are, maybe I'm an idealist, but I really
Yeah.
think those things are come together in the next 5 years. But it starts what I said in the beginning, which is a shift from cost and efficiency to value and growth. And and in the end of the day, Dollar Shave Club's a lot more focused on value and growth than Gillette is, who's much more focused on cost and efficiency.
True.
And and so the more of the Dollar Shave Clubs win and the Gillettes lose, probably the better for, um, long term, for consumers.
Yeah. Well, then, how do we, for lack of a better phrase, retrain the brand advertisers and media buyers in this space with what you would say? I mean, kind of help unpack what you think the biggest myth is that they're and biggest trap that they're falling into now. How do we undo that and retrain to move this industry forward?
Well, okay, now I'm going to sound a little heartless.
That's okay. I'm used to sounding that way myself all the time.
I came out of the newspaper industry.
Yeah.
So, we used to say, how are we going to retrain the newspapers and the newspaper people to produce, great digital journalism and really robust digital
Mm-hmm.
advertising platforms? And simple answer was, we couldn't, for a bunch of reasons, structural. And it wasn't the people's problem. It wasn't the individual's problem. It was the organization, the institutions, and the leaders' problem, and their capital and financing's problem. And thus, the only way it happened was the newspapers went out of business, and digital businesses that were purpose built to exploit either digital advertising or digital news and entertainment or journalism sprung up. And I think that that's a bit of sort of, you know, it's a bit Darwinian, but that's really what's going to happen. What I described with the Dollar Shave Club, I think we are going to see growth of companies like Dollar Shave Club that understand what it means to sell direct to consumer and add consumer value and grow a base from there. I mean, obviously now they're owned by Unilever, will still, and they've done a pretty good job continuing their path. But we've seen companies that were really big, like Procter and Gamble, that were built to sell through channels,
Right.
like Walmart and Target and Walgreens, not sell to people. Um, I give Mark Pritchard, their chief marketing
Sure.
officer, a lot of credit for really trying to change the direction of that ship. We'll see. I probably they have a decent chance to do it, maybe, but you can be certain the 50-60% of the packaged good industry that is not as progressive as them,
Yeah.
they're not going to make it. The simple way they're going to be retrained is they're going to be retrained when they lose their job and then have to go find a job at the new companies. And that's where they're going to be retrained. They will not be retrained and reoriented inside their existing institutions because most of them are not structured, aligned, incented, or capitalized to be able to exploit this emerging opportunity.
Sure. Well, I applaud the honesty. I mean, the honesty of your opinion. It's a wake up call that everybody needs to take. When you think of, I mean, you guys do a great job with data. When you think about all the data that's out there, I used to work in the big data space at Axiom as well, and delivered a lot of this TV by, with so much of the conversation today often falling on data and how much is out there. And, when you think of The Great Hack, which I just watched on Netflix, and how some other companies, especially when the political season's coming up, when you think about how data has been used, do you see any pitfalls with using too much data? I'm trying to argue myself into thinking about this, but I think part of this conversation is often that we know we need to use more data. We can prove it over and over again that it works, but now a lot of the conversation to me, especially with film like Netflix's film, is starting to shift on, is too much data bad?
Well, I don't think the proposition that too much data is bad is correct. I think the real challenge is that um, we can have a lot of conversations about the use of data, but fundamentally, most of our industry do not operate on empirical principles.
Good
So,
point.
um, I guess one advantage of being trained as a lawyer is that at least I at least was spent years thinking about things from what are the facts and what do we know and what are the principles we're trying to apply. And you never can have enough facts. There's always more facts that can be helpful,
Hmm.
but as long as you actually have principles with which you're going to apply them and you understand what your objective is and what you're after. And so we keep talking about data like it's going to tell a story, like it's going to make a decision, but it won't. And I think that it's maybe it's a little overly or trite to say it this way, but until we actually get good with small data, we shouldn't be too enamored with big data. I think that um, so I look at things like there's real simple concepts of reach and frequency that if people applied today, um, they would have much better media outcomes than they get. A lot of times people are looking for a lot of data to justify some course of action, not to take the best course of action. I think that we need more people that are trained in scientific method, that really understand what it is to develop a hypothesis, what it is to actually build an experiment, an experimental design, and then understand what levels of data you need for statistical significance to be able to determine and prove that out, and then to be able to test, learn, and optimize that going forward. And and that's a rigor that's not really been part of media and advertising. It was always part of direct marketing. So, so I don't think we have a problem with too much data. I think we just have a real user challenge in being able to be empirical and make and a lack of true data driven decision making.
Great point. Well, Dave, New York is full of a different breed of sharks, but you're on a shark's perspective, so I have to ask, what is your favorite kind of shark and why?
Well, my favorite kind of shark would be the two tiger sharks I ran into swimming off of the coast of Zihuatanejo about 10 years ago that actually turned out to be as afraid of me as I was of them.
Yeah.
When I ran into them, when I swam into them nose to nose about 100 yards offshore. And so the fact that they ran away and didn't want to inspect me further, that makes those two my favorite sharks of all time.
Yeah, I can't. Tigers are one of my favorites of all time as well. Are you a diver?
I am not a diver. I mean, I have a certification,
Yeah.
but I have not. I love to swim and I love water.
No,
So
I love tigers because if you stare at them, like most sharks, they will run away because they're not coming after you as some great meal for the most part. Though tigers will eat pretty much anything. Well, Dave, it's that special time in the show. Are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions you're going to be asked today?
I am ready.
All right, here we go. Number 1, marketing or advertising?
Marketing.
Good man. Number 2, linear or OTT?
Linear.
Number 3, lawyer or entrepreneur?
Entrepreneur.
Good man. Number 4, Netflix or any of the big traditional four, Fox, NBC, ABC, CBS?
Tough one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go out of the box and call Amazon Prime.
Oh, good one. I started to pivot that question to go with the Netflix or Amazon Prime, but I'm glad you went there to start. Why is that?
I love the fact that its entire economic support is adjacent.
Yes.
I think that's more what we're going to see in the future. I think media companies need to be prepared for things that are going to come at them they don't expect. So an adjacent subsidization of that business is the future of media.
Yeah, and isn't it amazing? I mean, we think so much about the duopoly with Facebook and Google on digital. I don't think people really understand how much of that will shift in TV once they really start connecting those dots even more. It's just amazing.
For sure. Amazon wins. I
Yeah.
mean, hands down, Amazon wins.
Number 5, and the most important question you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread?
Cornbread.
Good man. So, Dave, where can people find out more about you, Simulmedia, follow your thought leadership on the TV space and more?
Well, they can follow me on Twitter at Dave Morgan, NYC. They can send me an email at dave@simulmedia.com or come learn about Simulmedia at simulmedia.com.
Yeah, and I will say I've been looking at a lot of your tweets, some great content. So, Dave, thank you so much for being with us today. It's been an honor. Thank you for being with us today on the Sharks
Thank you,
Perspective.
Kenneth. Really appreciate it. Enjoyed the conversation.
So there was my conversation with Dave Morgan, the CEO and founder of Simulmedia, a TV ad platform that delivers predictable, scalable, and optimized advertising. And he's a lifelong entrepreneur with a strong background in both digital and TV advertising. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from our conversation with him. First, so just for a brief definition, data-driven linear TV allows advertisers to deliver advertising to an audience traditionally built with purchase and other data types via linear television. Simulmedia, like other companies in this space, have their own platforms enabled to optimize the ad delivery based on predictive behavior created through website behavior, for example, and then built upon other data sets if needed. Again, the better part than traditional linear is based upon how consumers reacted, and then optimize off that behavior to build an audience and then serve optimized ads, as opposed to just handing a network or a station dollars for a bad ad buy only based on age and gender or day parted. There's just so much more that you can do even in linear. Second, as much as a lot of people love to have you believe, most companies cannot scale a business in digital alone. You need to utilize other channels, and although TV has a higher hurdle and operates a lot differently, not necessarily always in a good way, it is a very powerful medium if you want to optimize your other marketing and advertising effectively along with your digital efforts. Yes, it's absolutely true that many agencies have done TV wrong over the years. Attribution has always been a mess for most to attempt to even explain. There are very few that I've worked with who are the real players in this space that understand the medium as well as the data behind it, and they don't always understand the digital side perfectly either. However, your customer doesn't care about your siloed efforts, so make the effort to help them act upon your advertising a lot better so that it's not wasted or confusing. Third, as Dave reminds us, stream isn't growing as quickly as we'd love to think. I'm a big fan of streaming, but it's still less than 5% of the total ad load. Linear is around 90 to 95%. The reason we hear this is that streaming represents nearly 25% of consumption, but a majority of that is on streaming services with no ads. Think of Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney, and other new services that are coming in ad-free. Only Hulu and some of the tiny players have ads, but even with the tinier players, you've really got to start thinking about ad fraud as well. And there's still about a third of people who don't have fixed broadband to stream in high def or 4K. His point, and I love this reminder, is don't get away from the blocking and tackling. So read the trades, but learn from other places as well. It's really unfortunate that most brands and agencies have been underserved with the knowledge that they can gain from learning in this space. They would quite often see a much higher lift on better coordinated TV plus digital campaigns, regardless of how the TV is served, addressable, connected, linear, etc. Conventional linear TV is still the majority. You've just got to work a little bit harder. And I love this reminder. Synchronizing is hard to do because there is not enough attention to reach frequency management. The two phrases in TV and digital mean such different things. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. And in the immortal words of Dory, gotta keep swimming, just keep swimming. And join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.